England embarrassed at Twickenham, Wales march out of Rome with a win, and Ireland are on for the Grand Slam. I'm Alex Reid, and this is the TW2 Six Nations Roundup. I'm joined with Fergus Mainland and Caleb Mutomwa. Fergus, you had a great trip up to Scotland. It must have been really enjoyable for you.
Well, great's maybe not quite the right word. I watched Scotland's under-20s get battered by Ireland and then had to sit and watch their seniors get battered by Ireland as well. But nationalism to one side, it was a cracking weekend of Six Nations rugby.
And you're a neutral, Caleb. You must have enjoyed that, no?
Oh, I had a good time. It's interesting to see everybody blame Marcus Smith for something he's got nothing to do with, and England having the inevitable happen to them after firing a coach. Warren Ball is back. World Rugby Order is back.
Yeah, and I suppose the only place to start is that absolute thumping that England got at the hands of France. We've got this graphic to show you about how England got absolutely pumped and how good France were. Just from your guys' perspective, do you think it's a case of how good France were or how good England, or how bad England were, sorry?
I think it's a reflection of what English rugby has been for the last 3 or 4 years, including the Premiership, what happened on Sunday. South Africa was on Saturday. South Africa was in the same sport a couple of years back. You've got a problem where the best players in the Gallagher Premiership aren't English. So this idea that the Premiership isn't good enough to produce test players, I think is absolutely rubbish. I think the issue is the people that are doing well in the Premiership can't be selected by Steve Borthwick, because it's Julian Montoya down in Leicester Tigers, it's Henry Liebenberg, it's Jasper Wiese, and I think that's where the issue is. So the depth in certain positions is Jamie George had to play 80 minutes because we don't trust whoever is on the bench for hooker. Yeah. There aren't that many good tight heads kicking around. And I think the best player on the field for that English side was Maro Itoje, and the slander that's coming is not okay.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you on the Itoje thing. Fergus, I thought that Slade and JVP getting hooked at 45 minutes was quite telling. What did you think about that?
I thought it was a case of, I think, almost panic stations. I just thought the whole game was just an implosion of English rugby from start to finish, and any subs that were going to come on, anyone that was going off, wasn't going to have positive impact at all. There is so much development for Steve Borthwick to do with this side. I don't think anyone fully appreciated how big the challenge was until they go up against the number 2 team in the world. They've got obviously Ireland coming up next weekend, so it doesn't get any better at all. And what it shows is just how big that gap is between these 2 top teams to the rest of the world and to England as well. And this rebuilding project hasn't even begun yet.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's trying to strip everything and start from fresh. There were things that were working in that English team. We saw it come to fruition last autumn against New Zealand in those last 10 minutes. Something was cooking and something was brewing. I think he's trying to do too much with the amount of time that he's got left until the World Cup. And I'm not so sure this whole horses for courses selection is the right idea. I think bin the Six Nations and focus on building squad depth and having a team that can compete when you go to France in a couple of months' time.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. Will Kelleher tweeted that Steve Borthwick has been involved in 7 of England's 20 worst defeats, which is a bit telling. 3 of them he was captain, and 2 he's been the coach, which is not great. But just from your perspective, Caleb, do you think there's actually any positives for England or not?
Positives from that game for England.
Look, I thought JVP and Henry Slade, to touch back to what Fergus mentioned, were victims of circumstance. I don't think you could bring any fly half, any centre, any scrum half. You could make a fruition of Farid Dupree and Anton Dupont, and those 2 would not have played well in that match because there was nothing coming from the pack. And one of the positives you could see is guys like Maro Itoje, and I think Lewis Ludlam was the second one, who played decently well because they played to their natural game plan. And I think Steve needs to have a hard look with his coaches and play to the type of game plan that his players have. When England have done well, it's because they have stopped teams from scoring maul tries. Why? Because Maro Itoje is probably the best defensive maul defender you've got after Adabed. And the idea of having them play this hybrid of a game that's fast-paced with Marcus Smith at 10 and also with a little bit of power when Owen Farrell is playing and trying to get Slade to kick, they're caught in between two minds, strip everything back. The positives is we know that the Harlequins pack is actually a good pack because Marcus Smith gets some front football with it. And you couldn't get any this weekend. Yeah.
I think what's interesting, speaking of Harlequins, Nick Evans has started to receive some praise for his attacking rugby that we saw in previous rounds, not so much in this round, but in previous rounds we're starting to see that develop a little bit. But I think what we haven't seen at all is anything from this Kevin Sinfield defence. We haven't. When he came in with Steve Borthwick, we're all looking forward to the whole system being tightened up, and they've just gone and had over 50 points put against them. They've had Scotland beat them at Twickenham against a massive crowd for the first time in donkey's years. This is not a good England defence. They aren't defending well at all, and they're not coming together enough as a unit at all.
The one thing I would say about that is Antoine Dupont did produce one of the best performances I've seen of him this Six Nations. And
I think he was allowed to. I think we need to stop conflating between Dupont being a great player. He is absolutely amazing, but there's so much he can do if the defence is upshot. We saw teams like South Africa not get wallowed by a French side when they didn't even have a kicker. You know, and I think the idea that I didn't know if are they a line speed defense, are they a disrupt ball on the ground defense, which we saw the Sean Edwards defense do well. They put two people on every breakdown, made England's ball dirty. We saw nothing from that Kevin Sinfield defense, like he said, and it's a bit of a hard ask, but I think they need to take a step back, go back to basics, and whoever was in charge of that team before, whose name I won't mention because we're trying to move on from him, actually wasn't a bad coach.
But I think there are definitely areas where France was so good at parts they were undefendable, especially Thibaut Flamand, who was outstanding all game. We put together a graphic about how good he's been over the Six Nations and how good he was against England. There's 2 tries, 2 line breaks, 4 defenders beaten, and 2 offloads against England. It was just amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, what you saw from France, from Thibaut and the entire France team, was beautiful rugby to watch. At times when they're playing wide, expansive rugby, it's free-flowing. It was glorious to watch, and it's just something that an English side can't compete against. It's playing with absolute confidence in themselves. They're taking risks that they know that's going to pay off, and it's, as I said, it's just an absolute joy to watch, and Thibaut was such an essential part of that. Yeah. And obviously he must have learned that from his time at Loughborough University.
I knew you were going to end on that. Just one question for you, Caleb.
Yeah.
How do you think that the England selectors should react to this defeat?
I think they need to go back to what Sir Ian McGeechan said on that 97 Lions tour. Rugby is like relationships. You have to keep 3 things well. Number 1, respect the opposition. And number 2, get the basics right, which is communicate well. And I didn't see any of that. So what they need to do is pick whoever they think will do them well in 5 months. Yeah. The Six Nations is done, and I don't think Steve Borthwick's his job is on the line because it's madness they put in another coach. So he has that going for him. Pick the players who, if you're playing a World Cup quarterfinal or a semi-final like in Australia, coached by somebody who knows you through and through, who has the best shot of getting you a result, and allow them to build combinations. If it's a Marcus Smith and a Farrell in the middle, we don't care. If it's a Freddie Stewart at the back, if it's Ellis Genge captaining, whatever that is, it needs to be the team that if tomorrow was a World Cup final, that team is going to start, because that's what he needs to work on.
Yeah, I think that's smart. And then moving north of the border, Fergus, you're not going to like this conversation, but
Am I not?
No, you're not, because what did Andy Farrell give his lads at half-time in that game?
Well, I think before you even get to half-time, I think you've got to look at that first half. And that first half, I think, was one of the best 40 minutes of rugby I've watched, I think, in a long time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Because what I saw was Scotland going toe-to-toe with the best team in the world. And as Duhan van der Merwe has previously alluded to, as Jamie Ritchie has alluded to, when this Scotland team clicks and it plays well, it can take on anyone. And you saw that in the first half of that game. The problem was they didn't carry that on for the second half, and Ireland were the team that responded far better to the adversity that cropped up with injuries than Scotland did, and Scotland didn't kick on at that half time. I thought the chance that Finn Russell took going for the corner, that try opportunity just before the half, I thought, do you know what, fair play, let's go for it there. but that same kind of intensity and clinicalness, if that's a real word, just wasn't carried through, and I think Scotland lost the second half far more than Ireland won it.
That's a bold call. What do you think about that, Caleb?
I disagree slightly with Fergus. I agree with him on the fact that it was one of the best 40 minutes we've watched of rugby. But there's something similar when France played Ireland. We saw as well as good 40 minutes of rugby. And I think it's something that's happening with the Irish side. They can live, if you can live with them for 40 minutes, it's not guaranteed that you're going to live with them for 80 because they're clinical for 83 minutes. And I think any team that can't play to 80 minutes will struggle. We saw when the game started to take and lose shape in certain areas where players got injured. I think Gray went off for Scotland. Ireland lost, I think, 4 players. The difference in one player that Scotland lost minus the 4 Ireland lost and still remain at that quality. That's the depth that you're getting. And I think it's 2 different systems if you touch back to the English team, where the Irish setup is solely based on helping the national team succeed. There's a stat. Johnny Sexton has played more away games for Ireland than he has for Leinster in the last 3 years.
I'm not surprised. I'm
Yeah.
not surprised.
I don't know why I'm laughing. I thought that was true.
But look at what happened. They can bring in players at positions they're not supposed to be playing in. I mean, they had at one point they had an entire front row full of props, which I think, do you know what? Actually, that's not a terrible idea. Actually.
Yeah.
They had all sorts of jiggery pokery going on at the line out with Jos van der Fleer. He was outstanding to step up. I was so disappointed with Scotland's forwards not being able to shut that down sooner.
Talking about Jos van der Fleer, we have a graphic for this to display his line out moves. I think he hit 6 out of 9.
Joburg's finest, they call him.
I thought his dad was from Holland.
Yeah, he's from Holland. It's a running joke that he's Van der Fleer, so he must be from South Africa, which is not true.
Still a international import. But I thought that was really poor that the Scottish forwards, who, despite the fact they were missing Grant Gilchrist, their main line-out caller, they weren't able to shut down this Irish changing about at all, and they were just marched over.
I don't know if Scotland will pull with that line out. There was somebody operating when Jos van der Fleer started lining up. Somebody moved to the front of the line out, and that's the well-experienced old guard in Peter O'Mahony. It's over 90 caps for Ireland and the British and Irish Lions. He knows what to do in that front, to jump at a line out where you're not getting as clean a ball. But what also showed is that Ireland care more about the system rather than the personnel. So anybody could have thrown in the line out because their system is so good, they were able to even create variation around that line out.
I agree with you there, but I also think that any second row worth their salt just puts a pod up at the front there and doesn't go on the ball. They go on the hooker's arm and just chuck him up, and then Jos van der Fleer has to beat them.
Yeah.
And if it's his first line out and you win it, then he gets a bit nervous and it snowballs. But they just let him off the hook. I think I agree with Fergus on that one. Yeah. But just in terms of the overall performance, where do you reckon that sits in terms of Six Nations performance for Ireland this year?
I think Ireland, there's never any. They haven't got a good relationship on the field, Scotland and Ireland, for whatever reason, and we've seen the hype that Irish media have been building up about the team, which is just ridiculous from them. But I think in terms of performances, I think what it showed, I don't think it was Ireland's best performance. I thought, as we've mentioned, a very good opening 40 from Scotland. But what it shows is that whoever Ireland put out on the field, whatever adversity they come up against, they're going to overcome it. And if I was England for next week, I'd be absolutely terrified.
Yeah, I really don't want to watch that game.
They're worrying me, hey, because they've put up a string of world-class performances since last year, from that tour in New Zealand, and it's getting up into the autumn, and then now with the Six Nations. For the good of everybody who's got them at the World Cup, I'm hoping that it's their usual pre-World Cup peak, and it ends with the Grand Slam on St. Patrick's Day, and then they go down. But I don't see that happening because they've been absolutely clinical, and the depth they're playing at is Conor Murray, Jameson Gibson Park, no difference. You can put either or and they're fine. We also saw Roseburn do well when Sexton wasn't on the field. So I think they're right up there.
Yeah, and then the final game of the weekend, or it wasn't the final game of the weekend, Italy versus Wales. Caleb, what were your main takeaways from that?
Italy are still growing. They need to get, it's like a child who's starting to learn how to walk. they've just started from crawling and they make silly mistakes like not holding on to the railings whilst you're walking up the stairs. Kick the ball out in your 22. They made the same mistake in round 2. They commit the same crime. Warren Gatland specializes in actually not playing brilliantly with his team, but making sure that other teams don't play well. And
Warren Ball.
He does that so well. Wales didn't do anything exceptional, bar Rhys Webb's intelligent passing and distribution and getting the gap in between there. But the ability to stop Italy from playing their usual game is what kept Wales in the game. And when they get chances, a Welsh Warren Gatland team will score. We've seen him do this with teams that have not been at the best. 2011, he took a young side to a semi-final. So I'll be worried because he's got experienced guys in there with a sprinkle of the new kids on the block, Shoes, Dyer, Morgan. Wales might be on the up. They'll get 5th place, but it's a good sign.
Yeah, and Fergus, any final thoughts from you on that game?
Yeah, what I'm really impressed by, I think, is I'm still really impressed by Kieran Crowley. I like him as a coach. I like him as a bloke. I do. And I like the honesty that he's delivering in his post-match press conferences. I think it's very refreshing, and he is definitely taking Italy, not Ireland, in the right direction. I think it was a game that Italy could have and should have won, and he owned up to that. And I think Michael Lamaro did as well. I think they were all really disappointed with that performance. And right now, I wouldn't want anyone else apart from Kieran Crowley leading this Italy team over the next wee while. Perhaps looking beyond the World Cup as well. I think he's the man for the job.
Right. Well, Kieran Crowley is in a job, and that was our review of this weekend's Six Nations games. And we'll be with you in a second with Talking Tactics.
Welcome to Talking Tactics, and I'm joined by the ever so insightful James Price. And James, we're looking at how different teams kick to try and isolate defenders, and it's how Ireland were kicking to find out either Stuart Hogg or Carl Steyn in the Scottish backline. And what do you see here, James?
Well, I see what England were trying to do with Owen Farrell, but I see Ireland executing it well. We see here early on in the game, I think it's James Lowe has the ball just there, and at the moment out on this left-hand side we've got a Scottish defender who's out on the edge, and if we slip to the next slide, we'll see. So they've actually moved into the correct positions here. Yeah. They've done the right thing, but what do we see back here, Caleb? Quite a bit of space.
Lots of space, and it ties into the whole how teams try and kick to do different things with their kicking. England try and kick to get a set piece. South Africa kicks to stay forward. France kick to disorganize the defense. Why is Ireland trying to create that space?
Well, they can basically see that Stuart Hogg is moving out of the place. If we move on to the next slide. So this defender out here on the left-hand side, they are covering all of this line because look at the amount of defenders that Ireland have here over on the left. And Stuart Hogg, who is still tracking across from Ireland, moving that ball quickly from right over to the left. That space is there, and Ireland are going to use it.
Ireland are going to use it, and that's key. That breakdown is key, right? It gets defenders biting in, and they're allowed to shift. So if we move it on, they're lining up the kick.
They are indeed. I'm not sure. It's Johnny Sexton, I think, has just popped this kick through into the corner, and they're trying to basically put the pressure onto Scotland here. They want Scotland down in this corner, and if we move it on, we know what happens basically. So obviously, as we see there, circled Stuart Hogg, he's chasing that ball. Yeah. He can't make it, keep these slides rolling on, and we're going to see that ball go out eventually for a line out. If things were to keep going, then we know what happens here. This is where there's a bit of a mix-up at the line out, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mix-up. George Tenner decided to take a quick throw in, but next to him it's another Scotland player who had the actual ball that went into touch first. And this is a bit nerdy, low 18.3 C, a quick line out.
You've got the exact right name, right? Of course you do, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, man, I have to. A quick line out has to happen with the same ball. And that's why they're not allowed to do that by Luke Pearce. And there's been a chat about, well, it's Ireland get the ball and they can score the try. Isn't it advantage anyways? No, because when two knock-ons happen, we still bring back play for the initial knock-on.
But the absolute key to this is that if we have a look at the numbers that we pointed out here, our wonderful graphics man Alex has done for us, we will see that there are 7 Scotland players who are still trying to get back into that line out while George Turner's trying to throw the ball. Because of the pressure that has happened that Ireland have put on by putting that kick back into their 5-metre line in the first 5 minutes. He's thinking, we've got to get this ball going, we've got to get this attack moving. And he's doing that before his forwards are even placed. And that is why eventually that ball goes over the top, if we go on to the next slide, eventually falls into the hand, I think it's of Caelan Doris, and obviously that try is eventually scrubbed out even. But that is just the first example of 3. We're going to look at another 2 now, where Ireland have put the pressure on through these kicks.
So basically, Scotland were trying to defend those kicks by keeping a man back, and Ireland were forcing them to make sure that man stays back and create pressure, which forces them to try and execute something they're not ready for.
Yeah, and every time they do that, Scotland just have to think again.
Another one here.
Yeah, we can see here that the ball is basically, again, once being moved from one channel out on the right-hand side all the way over to the left, forcing these defenders to move across and for Duhan van der Merwe to move up into the defensive line. He's got to make a choice, right? So that's actually Stuart Hogg, I think, there. So with this ball going out nice and wide, nice and early, out to Bundyaki and then eventually out to the centres, he's had to make the choice to move into this line. And as he's made that choice to move into the line, that's when they choose to kick it behind.
He's actually caught in 2 minds there, right? Before he even moves. It looks like, do I not? Which is brilliant, because as an attacker, you want to keep your defence guessing, don't you?
Yeah, well, Alex has picked the perfect frame here, where we can just see where he's had to go from going full pace one way to full pace the other way.
Yeah.
And he's in big trouble. Once again, that ball is going to the same spot. Stuart Hogg, having to collect it there. He does just about enough to collect it. Again, back on their 5-metre line. They're under so much pressure, and James Lowe is there to clear it out once again.
Wasn't he everywhere, James Lowe? Bundled into touch.
Always is, unfortunately.
And we know what that ends like.
Yeah, once again, just another one. This is on 25 minutes this time. And as we roll the ball on, yes, Ireland doing very well here. And we've got the same situation that we're looking at again.
So 3 scenarios. Scotland are not learning from their mistakes. Same amount of real estate on the left corner, with the ball going to an Irish fly half.
An Irish fly half who's going to pop this ball straight down into the corner once again. And this time, Stuart Hogg, once again, he's on his own this, right? He thinks, I've done this twice now. I'm going to be doing this again. I'm going to sort it out. But no, as we were just talking about, Mr. James Lowe, he is chasing this ball. He's putting an absolute fire legs on it, and he's going to get to that ball eventually. Luckily, Scotland managed to get it down. But that is just 3 instances where Ireland used their brain and used it properly to not have the ball to be able to attack. They just put so many different thoughts in that Scotland defensive back line's minds that they didn't really know exactly what to do.
Because they win either way. If the ball goes into touch, they've got a 5-metre line out where Scotland has to execute well to be able to clear their lines. Or if it rolls over the dead ball line, and like this now where they ground it, they get a goal line dropout, so they get the ball back.
Exactly, and like this is what I kind of said at the top, is this is what Owen Farrell, it seemed like this is what he was trying to do a couple of games ago for England. But the difference with this attacking, it seems when Owen Farrell, he was sort of playing it on his own. He was playing the kicks and waiting for someone else to make the difference. Whereas the Ireland team were just so lined up, so well drilled. They're all together in this same plan, and that's why it worked for them against Scotland.
That's why it works for Ireland, so well drilled. You can use that kicking game to attack for yourselves. Kicking is not boring. It can actually win you games. And we saw what happened when Ireland kicks well. Scotland were found wanting. That's all we have for you from Talking Tactics. And thank you to James for joining us, and Alex for picking up the right plays for us. Join us next week again for another interesting chat on Talking Tactics.
Well, thank you for that, James and Caleb. That was a very interesting Talking Tactics. And now we are going to do From the Press Box. And James is here with me, and so is Fergus. James, you've been looking at an article about the build-up to England versus Ireland.
As always, if you want some searing game analysis, you either come to the Sports Gazette or sometimes to the Telegraph as well, and to Charlie Morgan. He was basically looking at some of the short-term changes that England can make ahead of Ireland, and some of the ones that maybe they can't make before they get to Ireland. Essentially, it was a story of accuracy. He was talking about accuracy at the breakdown. I think there was the first try actually for France came off about 4 people piling into a breakdown. We fell off, and then Flamand just picked it up and did an awesome step, an awesome offload, and away they were in the corner. The same for kicking. I mean, we watched that whole game. Maybe not some of it. We probably switched it off. I couldn't because I was there. Unfortunately, you can't switch it off. You switch off your own eyes. But yeah, kicking accuracy. And then, unfortunately for England, the problem is that it was quite funny going through this article. So, he's talking about unforced errors. He's talking about accuracy in certain areas of the game. And you get down to the section of the things they can't change. One is they are deficient. Power deficient is his words. Apparently, Borthwick was talking a lot about the deficiency of the England pack in terms of the power against France. I think that was self-evident. He also talks about fitness, which is another one of those things. It's just there's obviously fundamental problems with England, and of course the last one, if you let me finish, folks, before you really butt in, was systems and adaptability. So basically, the 4 key areas of the game that you can't change.
So they're not very good at rugby, basically.
Unfortunately.
That fitness element is fascinating, that he doesn't think that they're actually at a level where they can go a full 80 minutes at international test rugby, and yet the Premiership is often hailed as one of the best leagues in the world, where so many of this England crop come from, and yet they aren't actually able to cut it at test level. What do you think that then says more about actually where the Premiership is in relation to other leagues, particularly some of the southern stuff with Super Rugby?
I would say it says, firstly, Test rugby is a completely different animal. We know that, but it is a complete demonstration of that fact. Secondly, that especially this year, we have seen really high points boards in pretty much every game. But why am I saying that? It's not like 50 points to 5, it's 35-46 or whatever. So defence has been slightly optional. It's been more about free-throwing type of attacking type of rugby. It's been about scoring tries. I mean, my dear team Saints, at one point we had the best attack and the worst defence in the league. So being physical in a game like this, maybe it does show that the Premiership is somewhat deficient in that. And also maybe that because there's, no relegation in the Premiership this year, they're not having to fight maybe as much as they used to.
They don't have relegation in France, do they?
Yes,
they do.
Oh, do they?
Yeah,
idiot. Do you think? I wonder then. Do you think this England side, out of obviously the 6 in the 6 nations, are they the ones? Do you think who are struggling the most to adapt to what we're seeing with sort of longer ball in play time?
I think England is struggling the most. Yeah, potentially. I mean, if you look in terms of the difference between where they should be at and where they're performing at, definitely England are definitely performing the worst.
Well, Fergus, you've also been on the internet and you found something very interesting about Gregor Townsend.
I have, yes. This one comes from Rob Robertson for the Daily Mail, found on the Mail Plus section of this, so it's some of the good stuff. And what's particularly interesting was that Gregor Townsend was very, very open and honest with Scotland's performance, and he split it into the first 40, second 40. First 40, as I've alluded to already, he was chuffed with. Second 40, it fell apart, and he was saying that he expected more from his players, and he felt his side just sort of ran out of energy after what was a very, very high tempo opening 40 minutes, and just weren't able to carry that on for the next wee while or so in the match. And I think I completely agree with what Gregor said, particularly from the likes of Finn Russell, with him being one of the most important parts of this Scotland team. Yes, he's a maverick. Yes, he's a magician. He's all of those things that have come over recent weeks, all of those names that have been given to him. But in a game where you're going up against the number 1 team in the world, you cannot afford to give away so many forward passes like what Scotland did against Ireland. It was basic, stupid mistakes that all of a sudden just brought Ireland back into the game and allowed them to start an attack off a scrum or off a penalty that was 30-40 metres further down the pitch. Scotland cost them that game, and I'm not surprised Gregor Townsend is asking more of his side, because it was a disappointing second half.
Yeah, and we saw in that talking tactics that Scotland got stretched across the field. I don't know what you thought about Fergus's theory there, James.
What, that Scotland weren't very good?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we see it every single week, don't we?
Apart from the opening week against England.
That's correct. And I'll shut up now. But no, I mean, the narrative is this. It really is annoying me every time I sit next to Fergus and we talk about Scotland, because we're building. I mean, it's a bit of a joke, but like, when are you going to win something that's significant? Beating England's nothing. Come on, we're rubbish. Yeah, you've beaten us for 3-4 years in a row. And in all honesty, Gregor Townsend saying, "I want to see more from my team." How many years has he been saying that for? Tooney's been great for Scotland, and he has pushed them to a new level, but purely because they had a good crop of players. As a coach, he hasn't actually done anything interesting.
Yeah, I think in that second half, particularly that Townsend's alluding to, I think if you look at some of the particularly defensive performances from Duhan van der Merwe, it's not up to the standard that he should be playing at, and he's not fulfilling the expectations that perhaps I think the Scottish public is putting on him.
I think that with Duhan van der Merwe especially, he does so many great things in attack that his defence, sort of people don't look at it, when actually I think it's been a glaring flaw in his game for quite a while. On that Lions tour, I don't think he was especially good in defence. He got shown up under the high ball as well, so that might be an area.
But for some wingers, they just get away with it for a period, but there'll be a period where he drops off his attacking form. Yeah. Take Chris Ashton, for example. At one point, one of the most revered wingers in the world, and we always knew he wasn't that great defensively. But when he was at Saracens and at England scoring a stupid amount of tries, he could get away with it. There'll be a point where he gets found out.
Yeah, definitely. And here's hoping it's not against Italy next weekend.
Yeah, here's hoping it is against Italy next weekend. And now we'll move on to the Abby Wow moment of the week. And now for the Abby Wow moment of the week, and we'll kick off with the last France try, the Penaud try off of the set play. You watched that, Caleb, and it was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's typical where you can score from any point is the set piece. If you can get your line out working well and play from there. And I think France epitomizes that, the idea that Antoine Dupont is able to nudge in a couple of defenders before he gets the ball away, and that creates that try. So I think that should get a good shout for the Abby Wow moment of the week.
Yeah, I felt that try was just very much, it was the metaphor of the entire match. Sort of compressed into one move. I thought it was beautiful.
It's so annoyingly clinical. It really, really hurts. By the end, I was a bit like, this is just going to happen now. Yeah. But yeah, it was amazing. And the next one, Fergus, the George Turner sort of.
Yes. Yeah. I put this in, and it gets a little bit of an extra explanation, I should say. It's more in the bracket of the Abby Wow. What on earth is that? Moment of the week, and I'm of course referring to the line out quite early on in the match between Scotland and Ireland, when George Turner, Scotland's hooker, went for the quick ball off the line out, and the whole thing ended up being called back. Ireland thought they'd scored. It was an absolutely shambolic line out from Scotland, and George Turner had overthrown the ball, ended up in Irish hands, as I mentioned, and it just left me, and I think just about everyone in Murrayfield, going, wow, what on earth was that?
Yeah, I mean, when I was watching it, I was like, what? Why is he throwing it then? There's 7, I mean, it's in Talking Tactics, there's 7 Irish forwards walking back to do the line out. Then overthrowing it, they do it all the time, that's fine, because you know he's going to hit that. But he just throws it to no one, like Caelan Dorris just runs onto it and scores.
Yeah, what was funny was Johnny Sexton trying to talk the referee into allowing the try to stand. Like, read your law book, mate, read your law book.
Yeah. Scotland got very lucky with that.
Yeah, and then lucky. The third one, the Liam Williams try, was pretty incredible, wasn't it, Caleb?
Yeah, the old boys coming back and doing it well for Gatland, isn't it?
Yeah.
People were writing them off, but he comes and he just shows. I got flashbacks of 2017, first test in the Lions, the one that created for Sean O'Brien with a bit of Elliot Daly and Jonathan Davis there.
You love the Lions, don't you?
Well, I love it when Liam Williams does well.
Yeah, I mean, he's so hard to tackle because he's just so bony. So, like, it's just all bone on bone when you're trying to tackle him with your shoulder. But we'll do a vote. Fergus, who are you going for?
Well, I mean, it has to be the Penaud try.
Yeah.
Partly because the George Turner incident comes in sort of with a wee asterisk and a caveat, because technically it's a separate category. But, it's got to be that Penaud try. It just encapsulated the entire France performance that was just magnifique from start to finish, and ending on such a high there with that try.
Good word. Caleb?
From one ref to another, I thought Luke Pearce deserves that one for calling it back, the quick line out from George Turner, but just for effect's sake, so I'm going to vote that.
Right, so I've got the decider, and I think I am going to go with Penaud, because that was a very good try.
Yeah, refs are never loved in rugby, but that's okay.
A very depressing moment, but it was a great try. So we'll move on to preview the next week of the Six Nations Rugby. So those were 3 brilliant moments of Six Nations Rugby, and now on to our preview of next week's round. And it is Super Saturday, James. Are you excited?
I'm so excited. Obviously, does that not sound genuine, no? Yeah, obviously. Last week of the Six Nations is going to be a cracker.
And Fergus, Scotland are playing Italy, and Italy might not win the wooden spoon if they win. Do you reckon that's going to happen or not?
I think, shifting Scotland bias to one side, what Italy have is a really good opportunity to finish the tournament exactly how they did last year. Scotland are missing Finn Russell, Stuart Hogg. They've both been taken out of the squad due to injury, with the likes of Charlie Savala. He's coming in uncapped. So it'll be interesting if Gregor Townsend parachutes him into the starting 23, which he probably will end up doing. But throughout the Six Nations, Italy have been in positions where they could have and should have won games. I think against France, I think against Ireland, they were in the contest, and I think they should have beaten Wales as well. So to get something really meaningful from this tournament, they've got to come to Murrayfield and win, which, given the injuries that Scotland is now facing, it's certainly not out of the question.
Yeah, I mean, Italy have played some really good rugby, haven't they, James? What are their takeaways from this tournament, do you think?
The fact that they've been in pretty much every contest. Apart from the England game, as you mentioned, they have been competitive in every single game. It used to be, not that long ago, 2-3 years ago, we'll go to Italy, we'll get the 50 and we'll move on. But that doesn't happen anymore because they've got a really good back row, they've got a really good back line. And I've been really impressed. It's difficult because as much as you can say you're in contests, and as much as you can say you're really getting involved in the game, how much is that for Italy? They're at a point where being in a contest is enough. For Scotland, being in a contest is no longer enough for you guys because you're trying to make that next level. Yeah. I've been trying to make that next level for 10 years. It's still not happening. But
it's coming.
Ho hum! It's coming. Next year's the year, boys. But yeah, obviously they've missed their star man Capuozzo over the weekend, but surely he'll be back in his shirt and lighting up the field once again very soon.
Yeah, they've missed him a lot actually. We made that graphic about their conversion rate when Capuozzo is in the team, when he isn't. He seems like a massive miss for them, for me anyway.
Yeah, so comparing their their good performance against France and against last week against Wales, yeah, their conversion rate in the 22 was a lot better with Capuzzo on the field against France. Obviously, it's not all Capuzzo. There's a very good 15 building there, but he's a huge part of that, even as a talisman for go-forward ball. There was a lot of sort of talk that maybe Tomas Waller might offer something different against Wales, a kicking option, something obviously Capuzzo likes to have the ball in his hand and run with it and do something amazing with it. But yeah, I mean, like we say, he's the talisman and he's going to be there for many more years to come.
Yeah.
I suppose what was just finally worth touching on, I was praising Kieran Crowley and what he's doing with the team earlier on as well. But we've just had news announced that we might be seeing some sort of a London Italy team might be starting to make an appearance coming up, which I think could be quite exciting for rejuvenating Italian rugby over a field as well, and just seeing what sort of impact that's going to have on the squad long term, probably post World Cup and everything. But there's a lot of things going right for Italian rugby at the moment, and even Scotland used to be one of those teams who would put out sort of a second string, not quite full blown starting 15. With the injuries to Hogg and Russell, they're going to be putting out the best possible team that they can in this scenario, and we're seeing that. The only team who's probably not quite in that position is Ireland. Everyone else has put out teams that are sort of first 15s because that's what they need to do to beat Italy.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's a tight one, and I hope Italy win quite heavily. But we'll move on to the next game, which is France versus Wales. France can still win the Six Nations if Ireland lose. How do you see this one going, James?
France have got this in the bag at home. They're going to set the stall out before Ireland v England, which is the last game, so they'll be there. We like to see these images on Super Saturday where you get the teams huddled around a TV. I remember a proper Super Saturday before when England beat France by a stupid amount, and then Ireland had to lose. That's always a great scene, and I'm sure we'll get that again this weekend. But it's going to be pretty much a formality for France based on how good they were last week. I can't see them taking another backward step. Obviously, it was a step forward for Warren and his men and for Wales this weekend, but I think the result's probably going to be safely in the hands of...
Yeah, the centres for me anyway, Fickou and Dante versus the two young lads for Wales. It's going to be an absolute bloodbath.
That is a tough one to do away at the Stade de France,
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got too much else to add on it, I'll be honest. I was waiting for something enlightening to come to me, but their last game of the Six Nations at home, in a year they're hosting the World Cup, Stade de France is going to be, it's the place to be this weekend. aside from Dublin, it's the place to be.
Yeah, aside from Dublin, because that is hosting the Grand Slam decider and it's against England. Huge game, huge game. How do you see it going, Fergus?
50-0.
Honestly, bluntly putting it, Ireland are going to cream cracker England.
That is blunt.
Absolutely cream cracker them. If England play the way that they played against France, it's going to be a Paddy's Day to remember. It's going to be the best Paddy's Day rugby for the past however many years, because no way can England turn up and perform as poorly as they did against France in Dublin this weekend. It'll just be an absolute massacre, and they won't be showing the Ireland team that they deserve, show them the respect that they deserve. This is what Scotland did. Scotland showed them the respect that they get as #1 team in the world for the first half of the match, and look how close the contest was. There was 1 point in it at the break, and that's exactly what England have to do. They have to take it to the game, take it to Ireland early on in the match, otherwise they're going to get walked all over.
Yeah, I suppose wearing my red and white tinted goggles, the only factor that could play into it is the injuries that happened in the last game, the unfortunate thing that happened to Gary Ringrose, and Caelan Doris is going to be a massive miss as well, isn't it, James?
Yeah, Dan Sheehan as well. I'm not sure how bad his injury was, but he could be a big miss in the hooker position. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference.
Just give me this, please.
I know, yeah. I mean, we're trying to be positive Englishmen, but the last time we actually won there was in 2019. It's not that long ago, but that was the year when we got to our cup final. We were quite good then. Not very good anymore. It's very much similar to the same players. And you can go into all these spiels about experience. They've been there, they've done it, but it was a long time ago. And I'm sure, I haven't got the record to hand, but I imagine our record in Dublin otherwise is pretty poor.
Yeah, it's got to be the hardest place to go for me anyway, in the Six Nations.
I mean, the last time I remember us going there on a Paddy's Day or just after a Paddy's Day, it was an annihilation. So I think it's possibly going to be much the same. Obviously wasn't in the review of the last weekend. But the thing, I was actually lucky enough to have a ticket to I said lucky enough, to have a ticket to England.
Sold an organ to get yourself.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And the thing that really concerned me the most about that England performance was just, after one phase of play, you just had no clue what to do. Ireland's defence is too good that we're going to get random on first place play, so I don't see, start Alex Mitchell, and maybe something might happen.
Yeah, maybe. But yes, that is going to be an exciting Super Saturday of rugby, and we will be covering it for you next week. This has been the TW2 Six Nations Review.